The bullet grazed Isabella Moretti's shoulder at precisely 11:47 p.m., shattering the crystalline silence of the underground parking garage. As the most feared Mafia queen in New York crumpled against her Maserati, blood blooming across her white silk blouse, she never imagined that the trembling night shift nurse who would stumble upon her would become her greatest weakness. Elena Rodriguez had two choices: call the police and destroy the dangerous woman bleeding at her feet, or save her life and irrevocably alter her own. She chose the latter. That single decision would ignite an obsession so consuming, so perilous, that it would shake the foundations of New York's criminal underworld and challenge everything both women believed about love, loyalty, and redemption. Elena's hands trembled as she pressed gauze against the stranger's shoulder, her nursing instincts overriding the screaming voice in her head that begged her to run. The woman beneath her fingers was devastatingly beautiful even in agony: sharp cheekbones, raven hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, and eyes like molten amber that seemed to pierce straight through Elena's soul. "Don't!" the woman gasped, gripping Elena's wrist with surprising strength. "No hospitals, no police." Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. She recognized danger when she saw it, and this woman was danger incarnate. The expensive clothes, the gun lying just feet away, the way she commanded authority even while bleeding, everything screamed Mafia. "You'll die if I don't get you proper care," Elena whispered, her professional composure cracking. "Then let me die in silence." Isabella's voice was velvet wrapped around steel. "I've seen what happens to those who betray my trust." But Elena couldn't. 13 years of nursing had hardwired her to save lives, not watch them slip away in parking garages. Against every rational thought, she made a decision that would haunt and thrill her in equal measure. "My apartment is 10 minutes away. I have supplies." The words left her mouth before her brain could stop them. Isabella's eyes widened fractionally, the first crack in her imperious facade. "Why would you help me?" "Because I'm a nurse," Elena said simply, though her voice wavered. "And because something tells me you're not the monster you pretend to be." A bitter laugh escaped Isabella's lips. "You don't know anything about monsters, querida." But she allowed Elena to help her stand, leaning heavily against the smaller woman's frame. As they stumbled toward Elena's modest Honda, Isabella studied her savior's profile. The determined set of her jaw, the gentleness in her brown eyes despite her fear, the way her dark curls escaped her ponytail in wild tendrils. Beautiful, innocent, completely off limits. Yet Isabella Moretti, who commanded an empire built on fear and blood, who had never allowed herself the luxury of weakness, felt something shift in her chest as Elena carefully buckled her seatbelt as though she were precious cargo, rather than a criminal bleeding all over her passenger seat. "What's your name?" Isabella asked, her voice softer than she'd intended. "Elena. Elena Rodriguez." "Elena," Isabella repeated, tasting the name like fine wine. "I'm... I don't want to know," Elena interrupted, starting the car with shaking hands. "The less I know, the better." But Isabella told her anyway because something about this woman demanded honesty. "Isabella Moretti." The sharp intake of breath told Isabella that Elena recognized the name. Everyone in New York knew the Moretti family. Everyone feared them. "Then I'm definitely going to regret this," Elena muttered, pulling out of the garage. Isabella smiled despite the fire in her shoulder. "Undoubtedly, querida, undoubtedly." 3 weeks passed before Isabella returned. Elena had convinced herself it was over, a bizarre, dangerous interlude that would fade like a nightmare in daylight. She'd patched up the Mafia queen, watched those amber eyes follow her every movement with unnerving intensity, and sent her back into the shadows with strict wound care instructions and a prayer that their paths would never cross again. Then Isabella walked into St. Mary's Hospital at 2 a.m., immaculately dressed in a tailored black suit, and asked specifically for Nurse Rodriguez. Elena's stomach dropped when she saw her standing in the ER waiting room, commanding attention without saying a word, looking absolutely nothing like the bleeding woman she'd rescued. This Isabella was all power and polish, a predator in designer clothes. "What are you doing here?" Elena hissed, pulling her into an empty examination room. "Are you insane?" "Probably," Isabella admitted, her gaze roaming over Elena with barely concealed hunger. "I came to thank you properly." She placed a velvet box on the examination table. Elena didn't need to open it to know it contained something expensive, something that screamed of a world she didn't belong to. "I don't want your money or your gifts," Elena said firmly, though her hands itched to see what was inside. "I did what any decent person would do." "No." Isabella stepped closer, and Elena caught the scent of her perfume, something dark and intoxicating. "Any decent person would have called the police. You risked everything for a stranger, for me." "It was a mistake," Elena whispered, but she didn't step back, couldn't step back. "Was it?" Isabella's hand rose, fingers barely grazing Elena's cheek. The touch sent electricity down Elena's spine. "Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you, about the way you looked at me, not with fear, not with judgment, but with compassion. Do you know how rare that is in my world?" "Your world isn't my world," Elena said, but her voice lacked conviction. "It could be." The words hung between them, heavy with promise and threat. Elena finally found the strength to step back, putting professional distance between them. "I save lives, Isabella. You take them." Pain flickered across Isabella's face, quickly masked. "I protect my family, my people. Sometimes that requires difficult choices. Murder isn't a difficult choice. It's a sin. And what we're both feeling right now," Isabella challenged, "in your faith, isn't that a sin too?" Elena's breath caught. She hadn't wanted to acknowledge the attraction, the way her pulse quickened when Isabella looked at her, the dreams that left her gasping awake in the darkness. "I don't know what you're talking about," Elena lied. Isabella smiled, sad and knowing. "Yes, you do. You feel it too. This connection." "There is no connection. You need to leave." But Isabella didn't move. Instead, she opened the velvet box herself, revealing a delicate gold necklace with a small cross pendant, elegant, understated, nothing like the ostentatious gift Elena had expected. "I noticed you wore one," Isabella said quietly. "The chain broke when you were helping me. I thought—" Elena's hand flew to her bare neck. She'd forgotten, in all the chaos and fear of that night, that her grandmother's necklace, her most precious possession, had snapped. "How did you—" "I pay attention, Elena, especially to things that matter." The tenderness in Isabella's voice nearly undid her. This wasn't supposed to happen. The Mafia queen wasn't supposed to be thoughtful, wasn't supposed to notice small details, wasn't supposed to make Elena's heart race with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. "Take it," Isabella pressed the box into Elena's hands. "No strings attached, just a replacement for what was lost because of me." Their fingers touched, and Elena felt the world tilt on its axis. "This is dangerous," she whispered. "I know. We can't. I know that too." Isabella's thumb traced gentle circles on Elena's palm. "But I'm standing here anyway, unable to stay away from you. Tell me I'm alone in this madness, and I'll walk out that door and never return." Elena should have said it, should have lied, protected herself, chosen the safe path. Instead, she whispered, "You're not alone." Isabella's eyes blazed with triumph and something deeper, something that looked dangerously like hope. The affair began in stolen moments and shadow-draped secrets. Isabella would appear at Elena's apartment when the city slept, bringing takeout from expensive restaurants and stories from a world Elena had only seen in movies. Elena would trace the scars on Isabella's body, each one a story of survival, and try to reconcile the tender woman who laughed at her terrible jokes with the feared crime boss whose name made men tremble. "Tell me something real," Elena demanded one night, wrapped in Isabella's arms on her worn couch. "Something you've never told anyone." Isabella was quiet for so long that Elena thought she wouldn't answer. Then, "I'm tired. So incredibly tired of the blood and the violence and the constant vigilance. Sometimes I dream of walking away from all of it." "Then why don't you?" "Because it's not just my life. I have 300 people who depend on me for their livelihoods, their safety, families who trust me to protect them from worse monsters than I could ever be. I inherited an empire, querida, and with it came responsibilities I can't simply abandon." Elena turned in her arms, studying Isabella's face in the dim lamplight. "You talk about monsters, but I've seen how you are with me. Gentle, patient, kind." "That's because you make me want to be better than I am." Isabella's fingers tangled in Elena's hair. "You're my conscience in human form, constantly reminding me that there's beauty and goodness in a world I'd convinced myself was beyond redemption." "That's too much pressure," Elena said, but she was smiling. "Then let me just love you instead." The words slipped out, and Isabella froze, clearly not having meant to say them aloud. Love. The word hung between them, terrifying and exhilarating. Elena should have run, should have ended this before it consumed them both. Instead, she kissed Isabella with a desperate hunger that spoke of surrender, of falling, of choosing danger over safety because the heart wants what it wants. Logic be damned. But reality has a cruel way of intruding on fairy tales. It came in the form of Marco Russo, Isabella's underboss, who showed up at Elena's hospital with thinly veiled threats wrapped in polite conversation. She'd been compromised, he explained. Enemies of the Moretti family now knew about her relationship with Isabella. They knew where she worked, where she lived, the names of her two younger brothers. "You've become a liability," Marco said, his cold eyes assessing her. Isabella's distracted. Soft. That makes her vulnerable, which makes all of us vulnerable. "I never asked for any of this," Elena said, her hands clenched into fists beneath the nurse's station. "Yet here we are." He slid a folder across to her. "There are two ways this ends, Nurse Rodriguez. Either you disappear, we'll relocate you, give you a new identity, set you up comfortably somewhere far from New York, or you become a permanent part of our world, Isabella's world." "And if I choose neither?" Marco's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Then I cannot guarantee your safety, or your family's." The threat was clear. Elena felt her carefully constructed life crumbling around her. That night, when Isabella arrived at her door with wine and that devastating smile, Elena made a decision. "I need you to let me go," she said, before courage could fail her. Isabella's smile vanished. "What? This, us, it was a fantasy, but it's putting people in danger. My family, your organization." Elena forced herself to meet those amber eyes, to not look away from the pain blooming there. "I can't do this anymore." "Elena, whatever Marco said, he's right." Elena's voice broke. "I don't belong in your world, Isabella. I'm a nurse from Queens who still goes to Mass every Sunday. You're everything I was raised to fear and avoid. This was doomed from the start." "You don't mean that." But Elena had to mean it, had to believe it, because the alternative was watching everyone she loved suffer for her choices. "I do. Please, just go. Let me return to my normal, boring life." Isabella stood frozen, and Elena saw the exact moment her walls slammed back into place, the softness hardening into cold fury. "If that's what you want." It is. The lie tasted like ash, but Elena held firm as Isabella walked out of her apartment and presumably her life. She made it exactly 3 hours before she broke down sobbing. 2 months of silence, 2 months of Elena throwing herself into work, trying to forget amber eyes and gentle touches. 2 months of Isabella's absence feeling like a physical wound that refused to heal. Then Elena's brother Diego disappeared. The ransom call came at midnight. A rival family had taken him, using him as leverage against Isabella. They wanted territory, shipments, money, and they wanted Isabella to know that even the things she kept separate from her empire could be weaponized against her. Elena's hands shook as she listened to Diego's terrified voice on the recording. 23 years old, fresh out of college, completely innocent, and now trapped in a nightmare because of her connection to Isabella. She had one choice. The Moretti estate loomed like something out of a Gothic novel, all iron gates and stone facades. Elena's cheap Honda looked absurd in the circular driveway, next to luxury vehicles worth more than her annual salary. Marco met her at the door, unsurprised. She's in her study. Third floor, last door on the right. Isabella sat behind a massive mahogany desk, studying blueprints with the intensity that spoke of violence being planned. She looked up when Elena entered, and for a moment her careful composure cracked. "Elena, they have my brother." Elena's voice was steady despite her terror. "Because of me. Because of us." Isabella was around the desk in seconds, hands gripping Elena's shoulders. "I know. I've had teams tracking him since the moment I heard we'll get him back." "At what cost?" Elena demanded. "More blood? More death?" "If necessary, yes." Isabella's eyes were hard. "You think I haven't been monitoring you these past 2 months? Making sure you stayed safe even after you pushed me away? Diego is under my protection because you are under my protection, whether you accept it or not." "I never asked." "I don't care." Isabella's voice was fierce. "You became mine the moment you saved my life in that parking garage. Mine to protect, mine to cherish, mine to defend against anyone who would dare harm you. Pushing me away doesn't change that fundamental truth." Elena felt tears streaming down her face. "I'm so scared." "I know, querida." Isabella pulled her close, and Elena melted into the embrace she'd been desperately missing. "But I promise you, I swear on everything I hold sacred, I will bring Diego home safely." "And then what? We just pretend we can make this work? That I can reconcile the woman I love with the violence that surrounds you?" Isabella pulled back, eyes searching Elena's face. "You love me?" "Of course I love you, you infuriating, dangerous, impossible woman." Elena laughed wetly. "I've loved you since you bled all over my passenger seat and trusted me with your life. But love isn't enough when our worlds are this different. Then we make them compatible." Isabella cupped Elena's face with infinite tenderness. "I can't walk away from my responsibilities, but I can reshape how I handle them. Less violence, more strategy, more legitimate business ventures. It won't happen overnight, but for you, I'll build a bridge between my world and yours." "That's a pretty promise." "It's a vow." Isabella pressed their foreheads together. "But first, we get your brother back, and we make sure everyone in this city understands that you and yours are completely off limits, untouchable, sacred." The rescue happened at dawn. Elena waited in Isabella's study, pacing and praying, while Isabella led her team personally. The hours crawled by like years. When Diego stumbled through the door, bruised but alive, Elena collapsed with relief. Isabella followed moments later, blood on her knuckles and fire in her eyes. "It's done," she said simply. "The Castellano family won't be a problem anymore." Elena didn't ask what that meant, didn't want to know the details of the violence enacted in her brother's name. Instead, she crossed the room and kissed Isabella with everything she had: gratitude, love, acceptance, surrender. I'm all in, she whispered against Isabella's lips. Whatever this is, whatever we're building together, I'm all in. No more running. Isabella's smile was brilliant and terrible and beautiful. Then welcome to the Empire, my love. We'll reshape it together. 3 years later, Elena stood in Isabella's penthouse, now their penthouse, watching the sun rise over New York. The Moretti organization had transformed, still powerful, still formidable, but operating more in gray areas than black. Legitimate businesses funded the empire alongside carefully managed, less legal ventures. Violence had become a last resort rather than a first response. She felt Isabella's arms wrap around her from behind, familiar and safe. Regrets? Isabella murmured against her neck. Elena thought about the life she'd built, splitting her time between the hospital and charitable foundations funded by Moretti money, using her position to actually help people rather than just survive. She thought about the family she'd gained, the power she wielded to make real change, the woman she'd somehow tamed without diminishing her strength. Not a single one, she replied honestly. Love, she'd learned, wasn't about two perfect people finding each other. It was about two imperfect souls choosing each other despite the obstacles, the danger, the impossibility of it all. And sometimes, the nurse really did steal the Mafia queen's heart. Did this story captivate you? Want more forbidden romance, dangerous obsessions, and love stories that defy the odds? Follow for more WLW stories that will make your heart race. Drop a comment telling me which moment made your heart skip a beat.